Heads in the Republican Party prevailed. During today's GOP caucus meeting, McCarthy reportedly defended his comments and called on Republicans to stick together. He apparently received a standing ovation from party members after his remarks. Good for them. McCarthy's reaction was the normal, reasonable reaction to have to January 6th. You can be really afraid and concerned about what happened that day while also believing that the left-leaning media's nonstop coverage of the January 6th committee is purely political. And isn't McCarthy saying exactly what Republicans should want to hear when it comes to the Capitol riot, that the events of January 6, 2021 were an abomination, but that it's time to move forward and talk about issues that affect Americans? Let's bring in Kevin Kosar, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, where he studies American politics, Congress, and congressional oversight. Thanks very much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. So first, let me ask you the big question. Is it clear, do you think, that McCarthy has survived this?
I think the odds are very high that he'll survive. The GOP is highly motivated to take over the House, and the number of hardcore dissidents is not significant, certainly not those who are taking a position that Matt Gaetz has taken. For example, Jim Jordan, he's a hard right guy. He's already said he's fine with McCarthy. And there are other members of the kind of hard right in the chamber who are just not coming back next year. Mo Brooks, he's gone. Louis Gohmert, he's gone. They're going to be replaced by other folks. And McCarthy, no doubt, has been working on these folks to bring them into his tent.
And what do you think behind closed doors? I mean, you study this stuff, you know conservative politics. What do you think the conversation behind closed doors actually entailed at the GOP caucus?
Well, that's a good question. McCarthy is obviously once again being forced to eat crow. He had to eat crow right after January 6th when he had to make the flight down to Mar-a-Lago. And he's doing this again. And, one takeaway from that is that he understands that if he is speaker, he has to fold when his members demand something of him. And paradoxically, that could be attractive to them. It's also very clear that he doesn't want to upset Donald Trump. And amongst the kind of really hard right folks in Congress, Donald Trump is a beacon of light. And they don't want anyone saying anything bad about him. And so for McCarthy to kind of, come and give his mea culpa to them, they can take some solace in it. But there's got to be a lingering trust issue. I think that what Biggs spoke about is going to continue to dog McCarthy.
What do you make of what I was saying at the very end of my introduction, that sort of you would think that this is exactly sort of what Republicans would want to hear when it comes to the Capitol riot, which is in the aftermath, talking about what an abomination it was, how dangerous it was, how scary it was, and now saying, time to move forward?
Yeah, well, increasingly our politics just aren't about nuance. And January 6th, when you criticize January 6th, Republicans feel like you're automatically criticizing Donald Trump because, well, he was the guy down the road, talking to the crowd. And it was his crowd who, for months, he told them that the election was stolen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he tweeted out and was talking about, the need to go fight and this, that, and the other. They just don't see a way to separate cleanly talking about January 6th and saying it's a bad thing, but we're still good people. So they would just much rather we don't talk about January 6th and don't be critical in any way, shape, or form.
Right. And what I do is, as you point out, with the nuance, talk about how the left-leaning media goes way overboard in its coverage of nonstop January 6th committee, this, that, breaking news, subpoena, way overboard. And yet you can also say that January 6th was a real, and I think that's what the moderates in this country believe is the position that I'm largely laying out there. But, who knows? The moderates aren't as angry as the extremes on both sides. So,
yeah, and you have, a lot of these people in the GOP, their first objective is to get through a partisan primary. And in those partisan primaries, very few people turn out to vote, and it tends to be the most ideologically motivated people. And those people, many, many of them are Trump lovers. And this is why, you look at what's happening in Ohio's Senate race, my goodness, you've got people tripping over each other to be the heir apparent of Rob Portman, but they're all doing it, except for a couple, under the MAGA banner. They're trying to out-MAGA one another because, again, that's the primary effect.
Kevin Kosar, thanks so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.